Rams house, it's time to talk about who's staying and who's going along the offensive line. On today's episode of the Rams Report, presented by Prize Picks. Guys, play alongside all of us here at Chat Sports and get $50 in end lineups when you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks and use code HMA. But on today's show, we're going to be breaking down 4 members of this offensive line who are key starters, but aren't just key starters, are pending 2027 free agents. 4 guys, 4 names you are familiar with: Warren McClendon, our starting right tackle; Steve Avila, our starting left guard; Kevin Dotson, our starting right guard; and Coleman Shelton, our starting center. 4 pieces of an offensive line that we've talked about already on this show having depth issues at a number of these key positions. I like the starting 5. They were one of the better starting 5 offensive lines in the NFL when they were healthy last season. They did a great job of keeping Matthew Stafford upright, and they were a huge part of his MVP campaign. The success that this offense had being the number 1 in the NFL last season. But now you got big decisions to make, and the cap crunch is a real factor. Because again, if you just look at the numbers, things look fine. Looks like, next 3 seasons, you got $82 million plus every single one of those. 2029, whopping $283 million. But then you remember 2 things. Firstly, Puka. Puka is going to erase about half of that $82 million, guys. That's the reality of the kind of money you're going to pay him. It's probably going to be more than half of that $82 million, just a little over half. And then Kobe Turner needs to get his bag. We just talked about this in a recent episode. I think Kobe Turner is one of the most important, most unsung heroes of this Rams defense, and he is going to want a significant payday very soon. He's going to want a significant amount of money from this Rams team, especially when you consider Jeff Simmons from the Titans, who I know a lot of you pointed out on that video, a little bit better of a player overall. But don't sleep on how good Kobe has been for this Rams team. Don't sleep on how important it is to be able to get after the QB from the interior and how much you can get rewarded for being successful at doing so. Kobe's going to get a bag. It's going to be even bigger after Jeff Simmons' contract. There's a lot that needs to go to these 2 guys. It's going to eat up an enormous amount of the cap space, but it's not the end of the world. There's a number of ways that the Rams can create cap, even if you don't consider a possible Matthew Stafford retirement. Obviously, that would create cap space on its own. It definitely would. The way that the Rams have structured his contract, they wouldn't have a lot of guarantees on the 2027 year until it hit a certain date at which it would be basically guaranteed that Stafford would be coming back. But if Stafford does decide to come back, we'll say that's a given. The Rams have a number of other ways they can create cap space. You could restructure Trent McDuffie. That creates nearly $20 million. And you can restructure his former, current teammate as well, Jalen Watson, his longtime teammate, really. $8.3 million added on that one. Another guy in the secondary to get restructured, Quentin Lake, can give you another $5 million. You restructure those 3 guys alone, you have created $33.1 million. And it's something else to consider here, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but as we continue to monitor this legal situation off the field, it's worth keeping in the back of your mind, Alaric Jackson can be released to save nearly $20 million as well. If anything was to go south with that situation, if there was to be a suspension, or if the Rams were just to decide, you know what, we're going to move on off of this. If his play was to dip, even if it had nothing to do with an off-the-field situation, you could save another $20 million there. So, if you take a look at all of that, which we're going to do in just a second. So I'm going to save you guys the math I did here on Puka Nacua extensions and Kobe Turner projected extensions. In total, I had Puka at about 43.5. I had Kobe at 30 flat, if you want ideas of those numbers. And then I restructured the 3 defensive backs. And in doing so, I was able to create $42.8 million for 2027 and leaves us with $77.5 for 2028. So plenty of cap space to sign about 2 of these guys, in my opinion, and still have some left over to make a couple of other critical moves that you're going to want to make. And obviously sign your rookies in the 2027 draft pool, even though we don't have that many picks after some of these aggressive plays. But let's go player by player here. Let's talk about who is sticking around, starting with Warren McClendon, an interesting piece of the puzzle here. I have a question around this situation, and it's one that I honestly, off the top of, right now, can't really give you a straight answer to. But I'm starting to wonder more and more, is keeping Warren McClendon the priority for this Rams team that we have at times heard that it or supposedly was? If you are a long-term viewer of the Rams Report, you may remember, if you've watched literally every video we've ever put out on this channel, and you are an absolute real one, you may remember way back in March, after the season ended, we talked about a quote from Tony Pauline on what the Rams were looking to do this offseason, what their top priorities were, and this is what he had to say. The Los Angeles Rams continue to express an interest in signing right tackle Warren McClendon Jr. to a contract extension, though it may take a little longer than expected. If they wait too long, McClendon could cost them a lot more money because his value and appeal to other teams will take off, assuming he has a good season in 2026. So, and again, the other context to this was Pauline was saying that this deal would likely happen before a Matthew Stafford extension. Obviously, Matthew Stafford got his extension after March, after that happened. So now you have to question, was Pauline just wrong or has something changed? And I think there's a chance that something has changed. This Rams team, I believe, wants to see Warren McClendon get back on track in 2026. And when I say back on track, I mean back to the guy he was during the regular season. Because you look at these numbers, at these splits here. Regular season, 83.5 PFF grade, allowed just 1 sack, 12 pressures all year long on 667 pass blocking snaps, allowed 18 hurries, 1 QB hit. Really solid numbers. He was one of the best right tackles in the league, allowed the second lowest pressure rate of any starting right tackle in the NFL. But then you go to the playoffs, and this guy just wasn't the same. On 215 snaps, he received a less than 60 PFF grade. And I know PFF's not the end-all, be-all, but you see the pressure rate skyrocket. 11 pressures on 215 snaps. He allowed 8 hurries, 2 QB hits, and a sack. At the end of the day, Warren McClendon was not the same guy in the biggest moments for this Rams team. And when you're a team that has the kind of goals the Rams have, you want to pay people who show up in those kinds of moments. As hard and as almost cold as that is, that's just the reality of it. At the end of the day, the Rams don't want to commit to a long-term extension on Warren McClendon until he proves I can show up in these kind of moments for you. I think the Rams are looking to see that from Warren in 2026. I think they've also got their eyes really closely on another young piece of this offensive line, Steve Avila. Steve Avila, and I got to say this, he is one of my favorite people on this team. He just seems like such a fun guy to be around. Every single time you see him in the media that the Rams are doing, you see so much energy from this guy. On the field, he seems to bring so much positive juice to this team. I always think back to the time the Rams drew somebody off sides, and he jumps up into a celebration and hits the first down pose. Just massive man that he is, leaping out of the three-point stance to do that. And he's not just a ball of positive energy for this Rams team. He's been a really solid piece playing for them on the field at left guard as well. He's rotated a couple spots, a little bit of a rough go at center, but he's settled back into the left guard spot really nicely. 75 PFF grade last season, only allowed 2 sacks and 19 pressures on over 1,000 passing snaps. And again, he's still young. Steve Avila is the younger guard of the two that we have to address today. because we're about to talk about our other guard. And I truly feel that it is going to become a decision for this Rams team between their two guards and who they ultimately want to keep. They're going to have to make a call between those guys. And so on today's show, we're going to try to do that for them, try to predict who's staying and who's going between our two guards. And that's coming up for you. But before we do that, I got to give a shout out to America's #1 sports picks app, guys. And that is our friends over at Prize Picks. Guys, I want to hit you with our Prize Picks question of the day here. We actually have one for you centered around Kyren Williams and the offensive line on today's show. Because obviously discussing the offensive line as much as we are, I thought it would be really fitting to hit you guys with this one from Prize Picks. And of course, if you've never played with Prize Picks before, you can pick more or less on player stat projections. You're picking anything from rushing yards, receiving yards, passing yards. And one of their projections that really stood out to me is this one on Kyren Williams. This is a season-long projection, and you may notice the more or less is at less than 1,000 rushing yards, 995 or 999 and a half. You would just have to get to that 1,000 mark to end up hitting on the more for that. And as Rams fans, we know Kyren Williams has never been a less than 1,000-yard rusher in any of his seasons as a full-time starter. I see no reason why that trend would change now. So I've got him in my lineups going right now, guys, which you can easily tail or fade using Prize Picks is social features. Guys, if you follow my username, Jackson Durham, you can see all of my latest lineups. You could drop a follow and you can tail or fade them with just one click. And again, guys, make sure when you sign up for Prize Picks, you use our promo code. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments and the description below. As always, thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. Let's talk about our other guard here. Our right guard, and I've been calling him our other guard to build up a little bit of suspense, but it's K-Dot. It's big Kevin Dotson. Our right guard, again, just like Steve, another awesome personality on this team, another awesome piece, another one of my favorite players. I remember when we acquired him from the Pittsburgh Steelers, a trade that I feel like was so underreported at the time because it was just a pick swap for a guard, but it ends up becoming one of the key reasons why this Rams team has taken the steps they have to being the best offense in the NFL over the last couple of years, because you get a perfect fit for your zone run scheme in Kevin Dotson. A perfect fit for it. He's 30 years old, but he's still playing fantastic football. At 80s, or he will be 30 years old, I should say. He's 29. He'd probably like you guys to know that he is still currently 29, but he'll be 30 by the start of next season. 86.4 PFF grade last season, allowed 3 sacks, 20 pressures on 885 snaps. I love K-Dot, and I think he could be a long-term piece. And the Rams have expressed a desire to keep him as a long-term piece. But again, you've got to make a call between these two guards. And it really does feel like the guards are the most likely to see a spot walk because of the pick of Keegan Trost. I believe the Rams intend and will ultimately truly need Keegan Trost to step up and fill one of these gaps. Keegan Trost needs to grow up fast for this Rams team. Maybe not in his rookie season, but by year 2, I think he needs to be ready to go as a starter. And when you think about that, it kind of makes Steve feel like the bigger question mark. At this point, as you look at these two guys and who they've been on the football field, obviously, Avila's a little younger. He'd probably be a little less expensive. But I'm looking at this team, and I'm thinking about the most important piece of this offensive line. Obviously, Alec Jackson plays the most important position at left tackle, but the most consistent player since he's arrived in Los Angeles has been Kevin Dotson. And I think the Rams want to bank on that. I truly think they do. I think the Rams will absolutely want to bank on that, because at the end of the day, Kevin Dotson has been a fantastic, fantastic piece. And you know what? On this graphic, their headshots are actually flipped, guys. We got Steve under Kevin and Kevin under Steve. That's my bad. Put the things in the wrong way. But obviously, you guys know who we're talking about here. We got Steve. He's 26 years old. I do think his projection would be a little bit lower. I pulled these numbers from Spotrac, and I think they're close to accurate, maybe not 100% accurate, but I think about $14 million is accurate for Steve, a little bit under 20, probably pretty close to the neighborhood for Kevin Dotson. I do think a longer-term commitment makes sense for Kevin Dotson, one of those deals he could ride out for the rest of his career. So again, you'd be paying more money for Kevin Dotson, but I truly feel he is, at this point, a significantly better player. But I think this is a decision that the Rams will want to wait on until after the 2026 season. I know that's not a super satisfying answer, but I think it's absolutely going to be the case because I think they're going to want to give Steve one last shot to prove I can take that step to that level. I can take that step to play at that point. Because what the Rams have shown us over the last couple months, they're kind of perfectly content to let the price drive up on other guys. I don't think they're rushing to pay either of these guys to save a few $1 million. If that was the mindset, you probably would have paid Puka by this point. You probably would have paid Kobe Turner by this point to try to save a few $1 million. And honestly, I kind of wish that was the mindset because that would have saved us millions of dollars on both of those contracts. And both of those guys are very likely to stick around anyway. So you just get those deals done. But I do understand the mindset of being like, okay, we got a decision to make here between Kevin Dotson and Steve. At any point in anybody's NFL career, they can start playing dramatically better or dramatically worse than they have in past seasons. We know that to be true as NFL fans. Nothing is ever guaranteed in this league. So I understand waiting here and being like, you know what? Let's see who plays better in 2026. The young guy takes a step forward, okay, we'll commit to him. We'll go with that as our long-term option. If it continues to be the situation it's been over the last couple seasons, though, where Steve is still a really solid player, but Kevin Dotson is one of the best guards in the NFL, and it's a clear gap, I think you go with Kevin Dotson. Lastly here, Coleman Shelton. Coleman Shelton, and I say this in the nicest way possible, this is not meant to be mean, he does feel like the most replaceable of this group. Across this offensive line, you got a lot of really good players here, and I'm not saying Shelton isn't a good player. He has been a solid piece of this offensive line. He absolutely has. But when you're talking about guys who are, and maybe this is my Rams bias coming out a little bit, but I think pretty much every other member of this offensive line is a Pro Bowl caliber player, Coleman Shelton is replacement level at the end of the day. I do think the Rams could upgrade at the center position. Coleman Shelton, 53.1 PFF grade. Again, that's not the end-all, be-all, but 20 pressures, 15 hurries, 3 QB hits, 2 sacks. Never been super dominant in the run game either, and I don't think anyone would call him a mauler. I could definitely see the Rams looking at this center spot and saying, you know what, Coleman Shelton, probably not an enormous contract here, but probably going to have to pay this guy $5-6 million per season if you want to keep him around after this year. You look at the draft capital that you do have, there's likely to be a center available in that range that you feel comfortable throwing in as a day one starter, probably a converted guard moving over to play center at the NFL level. I think that's likely where you're going to get your Coleman Shelton replacement next season, whether that's a cheap free agent, someone less expensive than Coleman Shelton. I think it's a little bit less likely. I do think the Rams try to answer that in the draft, though. I think the Rams are going to look for a young player to step up and try to be the Coleman Shelton answer and maybe a long-term part of this team. Or the other option, people forget about him, Bo Limmer. Bo Limmer's still on this roster. Arkansas starting center for a long time. Played well his rookie season. He's kind of been pushed back down since they brought Coleman Shelton back in, But maybe he steps back up. Maybe he ends up being the answer for this team if they don't want to go a rookie route. But again, let's round it out here. If you didn't get the sense of it, here are my decisions for these guys. And again, this is decisions at this point. I think the 2026 season can shift things. I do think it will shift things. But if you held a gun to my head and said, Jackson, you got to make calls right now. You are right now less need. You got to sign these guys or decide not to sign these guys today. I'm making these calls. Warren McClendon Jr., he stays. We're going to give him a contract to keep him at right tackle, especially with the turmoil at the other side of the line. I think you want to lock in one of your bookends, and he played really well in the regular season. I think you bet on your ability to continue developing him the way you have throughout his career, and bet on him being the guy you've seen him be the more often. Obviously, the playoffs were not ideal, but I think you bet on the larger sample size. Steve would be a no for me at this point, but purely because you need to keep Kevin Dotson and you need to keep the money around to do that. Kevin, obviously, a yes at that point, and then Coleman Shelton would be a no as well. I think you look to replace him either with Bo Limmer or with a young guy in the draft. That's going to do it for us on today's episode of the Rams Report. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your time. And as always, let's go Rams. I'm going to see you guys in the next one.